all dark.
You're recording now, you know that?
Yeah,
Is
I
it too
know.
dark?
Go ahead.
Okay, hi, I'm Tina Warner and I'm here with my grandpa, David William Warner. And I'm just gonna ask him a few questions and interview him. Okay, you can start off by, if you wanna tell us where like your grandparents came from and what part of
Miss
New
Barbara.
Jersey.
My mother's mother came from Ireland in about 1850, in 1850 and 60, as a mail order bride. She moved to Nebraska, Bancroft, Nebraska, and married a German farmer by the name of William Getzmeyer. They raised 9 children. In 1910 or 12, they moved to Sacred Heart, Minnesota, where they farmed. Grandpa Getzmeyer died in 1916, and they transported him back to Nebraska for burial. Grandma Getzmeyer continued to operate the farm with her sons and daughters in Sacred Heart for many years, finally moving to town about 1940 when she retired from the farm.
Just a minute.
Grandma Getzmeyer died in 1941. My dad's family, Grandpa Warner came from Germany and Grandma Warner came from Ireland. Originally they were in Wisconsin, then moved to the Renville, Minnesota area in the late 1800s. Say something to me.
Well, now it's about your childhood.
Well, where were your parents born? Your mom and dad? Did you say that?
My mother was born in Bancroft, Nebraska, and my father in Jefferson County, Wisconsin.
Okay, this is Dave's mom and dad. Okay.
Both families eventually moved to the Renville Sacred Heart area, and that's where my mother met my father. They were married in 1920. Dad was a railroad man. They lived in Montevideo from 1920 on. And I have one brother and 2 sisters, all 3 who live in Arizona now, retired in Arizona. I met my wife in Kingman, Arizona in 1944, and we were married in 1944, 5 days prior to my going overseas. We had 9 children. Tina's father, Bob, was our 4th child.
No.
What about your dad? Never.
My father was a railroad man and never owned an automobile. When we traveled by train on a pass. Dad did have a car, but he sold it when he got married and bought a house instead. He figured that was more important.
So how many years did he work for the railroad then?
A total of about 55 years.
And he died at, how old was he?
He died at 80 years old, 83 years old. Then he was born in 1888.
And he died in
Died
60?
in 1968.
Well, that's a, what, so,
12, no, he would have been 80 years old.
Okay, I'm here now with my grandma, Virginia Elizabeth Maher.
Warner.
Maher Warner. And you can do the same thing, start out with where your grandparents came from and...
My grandmother, Maher, and grandfather Maher came from Ireland. That would be my dad's parents. And
Did
my
you say
moth-
County Court or
Yeah,
something?
County. And my mother's parents were Hayfliggers, and they came from Switzerland. And they both settled in Missouri. And that's where they met, and they were married in Monette, Missouri. They lived in Monette, Missouri for at least 5 years. And after that, they shortly moved out to Herndon, Kansas, which is in the northwest corner of Kansas, where my dad was in the bank. He was a cashier in the bank. And that's where I went to school for, grade school and high school. And I was, lived there until I went to college. And we moved to Salina, Kansas. What else do you want to say?
This is Virginia Maher Warner's mom and dad. What are their names again?
Leslie, Elizabeth, and Charles Alphonsus. And that picture was probably taken when we were living in Herndon, Kansas,
Early 30s.
in the early 30s.
Okay, say that over.
I had two brothers and one sister, Charles and John, and my sister younger than me was Dorothy.
And they were all born in,
Charles was born in Monette, Missouri, and Charlie and John were born in Monette, Missouri. Dorothy and I were both born in Herndon, Kansas.
okay, and then, yeah, one you know.
After I came home to service, incidentally, my wife was also in the service. That's where we met. And after we were both out of the service, we moved to Montevideo for about 9 months, and then that was 1945. Then we moved to Worthington for 3 months, and then moved to St. James in 1947. By that time, Barb and David were both born. And we moved into our present home here in 1953. Period.
Going back a little bit,
My grandfather Getzmeyer is reportedly to be the first farmer to ever plant seed corn in Minnesota. That's a family story. Now, I don't know how much truth there is.
so were they always farmers?
Yes, always farmer.
And how about your dad's family, were they farmers too
They
before?
were farmers too.
Yeah.
My grandpa and grandma Maher, they were farmers.
Okay.
And my grandpa and grandma
Railroaders.
were, Grandpa Hafliger was a railroad man.
Okay.
That's strange.
And, pardon me?
That's strange. Both of our
Yeah, we didn't even think of that.
parents are farmers. and
Railroads,
railroaders.
yeah. And, well, even, didn't you say, it wasn't said in there that the first house that your parents built was one of the first houses to have electricity and gas and indoor plumbing and?
In Herndon,
Yeah.
right. We went out to Herndon to live. It was quite, what would I want to say?
Remote.
Rustic? No,
Yeah.
that isn't the word either, but.
From where did they move from when they
Well,
went?
originally from Missouri, and then they went to Tulsa.
But when they lived in Monet, was that more of a advanced town, or, I mean,
Well-
Monette was a bigger city, and Herndon is about 300 people.
And see, Herndon was out in western Kansas where it hadn't really developed yet. It was really, it was still country, rural. A lot.
but you did have, the electricity and the,
But eventually, at first we didn't, but eventually they brought it in so that we could, and of course when my dad built the house, and he wanted to have it as modern as possible.
running water.
We always
and-
had inside toilets, running water, and electricity.
No, you did.
Okay, when I was growing up in Herndon, it was a very small town. There was no theater, of course, and no swimming pool. And our main source of entertainment when Dorothy and I were growing up was roller skating. We used to live on roller skates. Of course, not in the wintertime, but in the summertime. And in the wintertime, we played a lot out in the snow. We used to play cat and mouse, I believe it was. Where you make the circle.
Circle, yeah, I remember doing that.
We did a lot of it. Oh, Fox and Geese was the name of it. I'm sorry, Fox and Geese.
And you had the lines going across the middle then? Yeah, we played that one when we were little too.
Then you catch.
Must have went for a long, many years. Or else maybe it didn't move up to Minnesota. You played it in Minnesota though when you were young? That game?
No, I was working.
You didn't go to school? Or
Yeah.
young? Well, that's one thing. Did say your education too? How far did you?
Oh,
Oh yeah, that's
well,
what you
I
were telling
went
us
to grade
about
school
that.
and high school in Herndon, and then I went to college in Salina, Kansas. But Tina was asking about our entertainment. Every Sunday, my parents would load the family up in the automobile, and we would drive 30 miles north to McCook, Nebraska, where we would go to a movie. And of course, when we first went, there was the silent movies, but they had the lady playing the organ, and we would follow along with the script on the screen. But eventually they were what see a lot of Ginger Rogers and Fred Astaire movies and a lot of Shirley Temple movies. And afterwards, if we were really lucky, we would get to go to the drugstore and have a chocolate soda.
Don't forget to tell them about the road conditions.
Well, the road conditions weren't always the greatest. And if it was muddy, I was very frightened of muddy roads, so I would sit on the floor in the back seat because I didn't want to see the road. My brothers and sister used to give me such a bad time and tease me because I was sitting on the floor instead of watching. But it was quite an event to drive up to Cook, Nebraska.
Were both your families strictly Catholic
Very.
forever?
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
Yes, both.
In those days you
I
gotta get
know,
that on,
didn't-
didn't you?
yeah. That's it. Well, even your education, was it all Catholic school or was
Yes,
it public?
grade school, high school, and college was all Catholic.
Was yours the same, Dave?
No, they closed our Catholic school in about 1936 when I was in the 4th grade, and then I was public school.
But did you graduate from high school then?
Graduated from high school in 1940 and started the university, and then eventually enlisted in the Air Force in 1942. And when I was discharged in 1945, I never went back to school. I was married and had children on the way.
Eventually.
And had to work, right?
Christmases were very important in our family. All I can remember is on Christmas Eve, we always had oyster stew. And after Christmas Eve, after our meal on Christmas Eve, my dad always had to go to confession. So while he was gone, the door between the kitchen and the dining room was always shut. And pretty soon, we would hear our Victrola. We had a Victrola in the living room, and pretty soon we would hear the Victrola playing "Silent Night, Holy Night." That meant that Santa Claus had come, and that was gone. So then we could go out, and the Christmas tree would all be lit up, and all our presents would be under the tree. And then my dad would happen to come home from confession. And we never tumbled on that. That was just his way of, that was the way they got the gifts out where we were. But you were asking about my doll. Dorothy and I both they were twin dolls. We each got the same doll. Of course, we had to get the same or
Yeah.
else we would be, yours is better than mine. So, but we each got a doll, and we each had a trunk full of clothes that my mother had made doll clothes for, and a buggy. I remember that one Christmas, that was so exciting because there was 2 buggies, 2 dolls, and 2 trunks was all full of baby or doll clothes in it. That really created an impression.
Yeah.
Isn't that Barbara's buggy still in the attic?
No. Oh, yeah, that's Barbara's buggy.
Yeah.
But did you say that about the oyster stew then, that was a tradition?
That was our tradition on Christmas Eve, is to have oyster stew for supper.
Now, is that from Ireland? Is that where that comes from, or?
Well, I don't know because.
Because you're Irish background too, right?
Yeah.
And you had oyster stew also. That
Christmas
was-
traditions oyster stew, if my dad was home. But he was a railroad man, and he felt sorry for the younger men who were working with the railroad who had younger families than he had, so he would volunteer to work over the Christmas. So many times our Christmas Eve would be 2-3 days after Christmas, actually, because we'd always wait for Dad to come home before we opened presents or anything.
But you might talk about Aunt Emma, how she used to come home loaded up with gifts for you. Aunt Emma, that was your.
You're on tape.
Oh, I'm on. No,
No,
She was.
phase in your life.
go ahead.
On tape another.
Well,
Go ahead.
and talk to-
Yep. That
Oh,
doesn't-
I had an Aunt Emma who was what you might call an old maid in those days. She had a steady boyfriend for 20 years but never married him.
Now, who is she related to? Your
She
mom
was
or your
my
dad?
mother's mother,
Your mother's sister.
mother's sister.
Yeah.
And Emma would always come home on Christmas Eve loaded down with presents for
So she
all.
worked. So she had money.
Not a lot, but she had money, yeah. But eventually in 1945, Emma and her boyfriend got married. She was very generous person with us kids at Christmas.
She was crazy about your kids.
And after they were married, why we'd go down to their house on holidays, Thanksgiving, Christmas, and feast, fit for
Because they never
kings.
had children, right?
No, they were too old to have children by the time they got married. That's about all I can tell you.
It's my grandpa and grandma, David, Virginia Warner. They were married September 5th, 1944
Four.
in Lincoln, Nebraska on the
Everybody's-
air base.
This picture's taken in front of the Capitol.
The picture was taken from the Capitol. And
You were actually in the, what was it called, the Air Corps at that time?
Yeah, Air Force.
It was the Air Force.
Army, Air, let's see, where?
I thought it was Army Air
Stop.
Corps.
Here's the whole family now. Well, in 1974, when there was only one grandchild, now there's how many?
How many grandchildren do you have?
Oh, 15.
And now there's 15 of them. This is back in the hippie days, the long hair, the bell bottoms.
Bell bottoms are coming back.
This was taken. What year did Rick and Julie get married?
A few years ago.
A couple years ago. All the grandkids, well, one just came, so there's one.
Home where I was born and raised from 1922 on
In Montevideo.
in Montevideo, Minnesota. My dad bought the house in 1920 when they were married. That's the house that has the running water, the inside toilets.
And
Well, thank you very much for letting me interview you. And
Enjoyed
About your
it
past?
very much. Tina.
Yes, Tina, I hope that it works out okay.
thank you.